Captain Li Huan stood at the window of his ship looking out at the stars. The Teguk was not a big ship. It was built for talking, not fighting. Li Huan liked it that way. He had been a diplomat for 20 years and he believed that words could solve most problems. His ship was heading to the Galactic Council Station. This was a huge space station where all the different alien races met to make decisions. Humans had been part of the council for 150 years, but they were still considered a protected developing species. This meant they could talk at meetings, but they could not make big decisions. Dr. Park Minji walked up to him. She was a scientist who studied alien cultures. "Captain, we are getting close to the station," she said. "Ambassador Kim Jae-hyun wants to see you before we dock." Li Huan nodded and followed her to the meeting room. Ambassador Kim Jae-hyun was an older man with gray hair. He had been working with aliens longer than anyone else on the ship. He looked worried. "Captain, I have bad news," Kim Jae-hyun said. "The Kethmoran Empire has asked the Council to remove our protected status. They want us to either become their servants or leave Council space completely." Li Huan felt his stomach drop. The Kethmorans were a warrior race. They had big ships and loved to fight. They had been growing stronger for the past 50 years. "What are our chances?" he asked. "Not good," Kim Jae-hyun replied. "Most of the younger council members think we have been protected too long. They say it is time for humans to stand on their own." Dr. Park Minji was looking at her tablet. "I have been studying the voting patterns. The Kethmorans have been making deals with other species. They have promised them better trade agreements if they vote against us." The ship docked at the council station. It was a massive structure that could hold millions of beings. Ships from hundreds of different worlds were parked around it. Some were beautiful and graceful. Others were ugly and practical. The human ship looked very small next to them. They walked through the corridors of the station. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around them. Some had tentacles, others had wings. Some walked on two legs like humans, others slithered or rolled. After all these years, Li Huan still found it amazing to see so many different forms of life. The council chamber was enormous. It had seats for representatives from 847 different star systems. The human section was small and near the back. This showed their low status in the council. Overlord Vex Thara of the Kethmoran Empire stood up to speak. He was tall and covered in scales. His voice was deep and commanding. "Honored council members," he began, "we have protected the humans long enough. They are weak and contribute nothing to our great alliance. It is time to remove their protected status." Many council members nodded in agreement. The Kethmorans had become very powerful and other species did not want to anger them. Then something unexpected happened. High Councilor Zelnithos stood up. He was very old even for his long-lived species. Most council members had never heard him speak. His voice was quiet, but somehow everyone could hear him clearly. "Young ones," he said, looking around the chamber, "you do not remember the old times. You do not know why the rule was made." He paused and looked directly at Overlord Vexithera. "There is an ancient rule that has kept peace in this galaxy for thousands of years. Never provoke the humans. Never corner them. Never give them a reason to remember what they truly are." Overlord Vexithera laughed. "You speak of fairy tales, old one. The humans are farmers and traders. They have no real military. Their ships are slow and weak." Other council members began to whisper and laugh. High Councilor Zelnithos looked sad. "You do not understand," he said. "The humans chose to be peaceful. They chose to join us as a protected species. But choice can be taken away." "Enough of this nonsense," Vexithara said. "I call for a vote. All in favor of removing human protected status?" Hands, tentacles, and other appendages rose around the chamber. Li Huan counted them with growing dread. When the count was finished, the humans had lost by a huge margin. "The motion passes," announced the council speaker. "Humans have 30 standard days to either accept Kethmoran oversight or leave council space." Ambassador Kim Jae-hyun stood up. His voice was calm, but Li Huan could see anger in his eyes. "Honored council, we came here in peace 150 years ago. We have been good partners and faithful allies. We ask you to reconsider this decision. The vote is final," Vexthara said with a cruel smile. "You have 30 days. As the council session ended, Li Huan felt numb. Everything humans had built in this part of the galaxy was about to be destroyed. But then he noticed something strange. Dr. Park Minji was not looking upset. Instead, she was typing quickly on her tablet, sending messages to someone. High Counselor Zelnithos approached them as they prepared to leave. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then spoke quietly. "Come with me. There are things you must know." He led them to a small private room. Once the door was closed, he activated a device that would prevent anyone from listening. "You do not know your own history," he said to the humans. "Your leaders hid it from you and we helped them do it." He showed them an old data crystal. "This contains fragments of records from the time before the council existed. Your species fought a war so terrible that all records of it were sealed. A pact was made to never speak of it again." Kim Ji-hyun took the crystal with shaking hands. "What kind of war?" "A war that nearly destroyed everything," Zelnithos replied. "When your people finally achieved peace among themselves, they came to us. They asked to be protected not for their own safety but for ours. They wanted to make sure they would never have a reason to become what they once were." Li Huan felt a chill run down his spine. "What were we?" The old alien looked at him with ancient sad eyes. "You were the apex predators of this galaxy, and tomorrow Overlord Vexithara is going to find out why that was a rule worth keeping." As they returned to their ship, Li Huan noticed that Dr. Park Minji was still sending messages. Her fingers moved quickly over her tablet, and she had a strange look in her eyes. It was not the look of a peaceful scientist. It was the look of someone preparing for war. The Teguk left the council station and headed back toward human space. But as they traveled, Li Huan began to notice things he had never seen before. Hidden panels in the ship's walls, sections that were marked as storage but seemed to contain something else. Crew members who moved with a precision that reminded him more of soldiers than diplomats. For the first time in his life, Captain Li Huan began to wonder if he really knew anything about his own species at all. 3 days after the council vote, Overlord Vexithara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Edge. He was looking at a display showing the human colony world of Kepler 442b. 2.5 million humans lived there, mostly farmers and their families. It would be an easy target. "Send the demand for surrender," he ordered his communications officer. On the planet below, Han Kyung-soo was working in his fields when the message came through. He was a simple man who grew food to feed his community. He had a wife and 3 children. He had never hurt anyone in his life. The message was broadcast to every communication device on the planet. Vexthara's scaled face appeared on screens everywhere. "Humans of Kepler 442b," his voice boomed. "Your council protection is ended. You will surrender to the Kethmoran Empire immediately. You have 1 hour to comply." Han Kyung-soo dropped his farming tool and ran to his house. His wife, Song Yoonji, was holding their youngest child. Their other 2 children stood behind her, scared and confused. "What do we do?" Song Yoonji asked. Han Kyung-soo did not know. He was the colony's administrator, but he had never dealt with anything like this. He tried to contact other human worlds, but the Kethmoran ships were blocking all communications. 1 hour passed. Then Vexithara's ships began firing. The orbital bombardment was meant to be a demonstration. Vexithara only wanted to scare the humans into surrendering, but his weapons were powerful, and the human buildings were not built to withstand military attacks. In the first hour, 50,000 people died. Han Kyung-soo's house was destroyed while his family was still inside. The farming communities were turned into burning craters. The peaceful world became a scene of horror. The attack was broadcast across the galaxy. Other species watched in shock as the Kethmorans destroyed a defenseless world. Some felt sorry for the humans. Others thought this proved that humans were too weak to survive in the galaxy. But on Earth, something very different was happening. Admiral Song Ki-won was sitting in his office when the news reached him. He was the commander of Earth's defense fleet, which everyone believed was just for ceremonies and patrols. He was known as a peaceful man who preferred talking to fighting. When he saw the images from Kepler 442b, Song Ki-won's face changed. The gentle expression disappeared. Something cold and dangerous took its place. He pressed a button on his desk. "Activate Protocol 7, he said. The person on the other end of the communication was quiet for a moment. "Sir, are you sure? Protocol 7 has never been activated." "Activate it now," Song Ki-won repeated. Across human space, things began to happen that no alien had ever seen before. Dr. Yu Siona, who worked in the Human Archaeological Division, received an urgent message. She and her team immediately went to sites that had been marked as historical research areas for over a century. These were not archaeological sites. They were weapon vaults. Deep underground on dozens of worlds, massive doors opened. Ancient machines came to life. Factories that had been sleeping for 150 years began to hum with activity. General Choi Hyunwoo appeared on every human communication channel. He was a man that most humans had never heard of, but his voice carried absolute authority. "Citizens," he said, "today our enemies chose to show us their true nature. They murdered 50,000 of our people, including children. They broke the peace we have maintained for 150 years. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was like ice. They wanted to see what we truly are. They will. On hidden bases throughout the galaxy, humans began to change. Commander Shin Dong-yuk was supposedly a trade coordinator on a remote station. But when the activation codes came through, he opened a concealed weapons locker and put on military armor that no alien had ever seen before. Captain Lee Hwan was still traveling back from the council station when his ship received new orders. Dr. Park Minji approached him with a look he had never seen before. "Captain," she said, "I need to show you something." She led him to what he had always thought was a storage room. She pressed her hand against a scanner he had never noticed before. The wall opened, revealing a command center filled with weapons and military equipment. "Dr. Park," Li Huan said slowly, "what is this?" "I am not just a cultural researcher," she replied. "I am military intelligence. I have been studying alien weaknesses and military capabilities for 20 years. Every human in council space has been gathering information." Li Huan felt the floor of his understanding collapse. "How many of us are really what we claim to be?" "Very few," Park Minji answered. "The humans you know as farmers, traders, and scientists. Most of them are veterans. The colonies you think are agricultural settlements are actually fortress worlds. The trade ships are disguised warships." As if to prove her point, the Teguk began to transform around them. Panels slid away to reveal weapon systems. The ship's exterior changed as hidden armor plating extended. In minutes, their small diplomatic vessel had become something that looked capable of destroying a small fleet. Meanwhile, Vexithara was preparing his second attack. He had chosen New Sejong, another human colony, as his next target. His intelligence told him it was a mining world with only basic defenses. When his fleet arrived, they were met by something unexpected. Commander Shin Dong-hyuk's ships were waiting for them. The Kethmoran commander tried to contact the human vessels. "Human ships, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Shin Dong-hyuk's response was simple: "No." The battle that followed was not what anyone expected. The human ships moved like they were alive, dodging Kethmoran weapons with impossible precision. Their own weapons cut through Kethmoran shields like they were made of paper. When it was over, every Kethmoran ship was destroyed or disabled. Not a single human vessel was lost. Back on the Death's Edge, Vexithara received reports that made no sense. His powerful fleet had been defeated by a handful of human ships. His officers told him the human weapons were unlike anything they had ever seen. "Impossible," he said. "The humans have no military technology. Our intelligence confirms this." But as more reports came in, he began to understand that something was very wrong. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy. Not the slow cargo vessels and small patrol boats that everyone knew about, but warships of incredible power. Vexithara made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We attack Earth itself," he announced. "If we destroy their homeworld, the rest will surrender." He gathered the largest fleet the Kethmoran Empire had ever assembled. Over 5,000 ships, enough to destroy any world in the galaxy. As they approached the Sol system, Vexithara felt confident. Earth was defended by only 200 ships at most. Admiral Song Ki-won stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the approaching enemy fleet. To the Kethmorans, it looked like just another small human patrol ship. They had no idea they were looking at a dreadnought-class warship that had been disguised for over a century. Behind him, Earth's ceremonial fleet was revealing its true nature. 200 ships became 20,000 as hidden vessels emerged from asteroid bases, moon facilities, and camouflaged positions throughout the solar system. Song Ki-won opened a communication channel to the approaching Kethmoran fleet. His voice was calm and polite, the same tone he had used in diplomatic meetings for decades. "Overlord Vexithara," he said, "you have made a mistake. You may still withdraw and prevent further bloodshed." Vexithara laughed at the transmission. Human, you are outnumbered 25-1. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Song Ki-wan's expression did not change. You misunderstood something, he replied. We were never the ones in danger. The human fleet opened fire, and Vexthera learned why there had been an ancient rule about never provoking humans. The battle for Earth lasted 6 hours. When it was over, only 300 Kethmoran ships remained out of the 5,000 that had attacked. These survivors were allowed to escape, but not by accident. Colonel O'Suman stood in her command center, watching the fleeing enemy ships. She was head of Human Psychological Warfare Division, a department that most humans did not even know existed. Her job was to make sure the right message spread throughout the galaxy. Let them run, she told her officers. Fear travels faster than any weapon. The surviving Kethmoran crews would tell others what they had seen. They would speak of human weapons that adapted during battle, of ships that seemed to think for themselves, of tactics that made no logical sense but worked perfectly. Captain Bei Jinsu commanded one of the most important ships in the human fleet, though no one would have guessed it by looking at it. The Dokdo appeared to be a simple research vessel, but it was actually a stealth ship that could become invisible to almost any sensor. For weeks, Bei Jinsu and his crew had been following Kethmoran fleets without being detected. They had mapped every ship, identified every weakness, and fed targeting data back to human command. When the battle began, every enemy vessel found itself being attacked by weapons they could not see or understand. But the humans did not simply destroy everything. Engineer Lim Taehyun had designed something much more impressive than superior weapons. He had created ships that could learn and adapt in real time. During the battle, human vessels scanned destroyed Kethmoran ships and immediately began incorporating their technology. But they did not just copy what they found, they improved it. Weapons became more powerful, shields became stronger, engines became faster. What started as familiar human ship designs evolved into something new and terrifying during the fight itself. The Kethmorans found themselves fighting an enemy that became stronger with every passing minute. Fleet Admiral Park Seo-young watched the battle from her command ship. She was the supreme commander of all human naval forces, a position that had been kept secret for 150 years. As the last enemy ships fled, she opened a communication channel to all human forces. Phase 1 is complete, she announced. Initiate Phase 2. Across the galaxy, things began to happen that shocked every alien species. Human ships emerged from places where no one had expected them. Asteroid fields that had been empty suddenly filled with warships. Planets that were supposed to be uninhabited revealed massive military bases. The peaceful human colonies showed their true nature. Farmers put down their tools and picked up weapons with practiced ease. Mining equipment was quickly converted into manufacturing plants for military supplies. Civilian ships transformed into support vessels for the growing human fleet. On the Galactic Council Station, emergency meetings were being held around the clock. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched in horror as reports came in from across the galaxy. How is this possible? Demanded the Speaker of the Council. Our intelligence reports showed that humans had almost no military capability. High Counselor Zelnithos sat quietly in his seat, looking older than ever. Finally, he stood up to speak. I tried to warn you, he said. Humans did not join the Council because they needed our protection. They joined because we needed theirs. He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it had been 3,000 years ago. Before the Council existed, there was chaos. Hundreds of wars raged across the stars. Species fought each other constantly. Then humanity had their own civil war, and it was so terrible that they decided never to fight again. The display changed, showing human ships arriving at the first Council worlds. They came to us voluntarily. They offered to give up their weapons and accept protected status. We thought we were being generous by accepting them. We did not understand that they were protecting us from themselves. Another Council member stood up, but our reports show that they really were peaceful. They had no hidden weapons. They did not need to hide weapons, Zelnithos replied sadly. They hid their knowledge, their industrial capacity, their military organization. Everything they needed to build the greatest war machine the galaxy has ever seen was disguised as peaceful civilian infrastructure. Dr. Kang Woo-jin appeared on the Council's communication system. He had been advising the Council on peaceful conflict resolution for decades. and many members considered him a trusted friend. "Honored council members," he said, "I regret to inform you that my advice over the years was not entirely honest. Every suggestion I made was designed to weaken potential military threats while strengthening human positions throughout the galaxy." The council members stared at him in shock. One of them managed to speak. "Dr. Kang, are you saying that you have been working against us all this time?" "No," Kang Woojin replied. "I have been working for galactic peace, but I did so by making sure that any species capable of threatening that peace would be unable to do serious damage if they chose to become aggressive." As the truth sank in, more reports arrived. Commander Yoon Nara's deep space reconnaissance missions had discovered that humans had been placing construction drones throughout the galaxy for over a century. These drones had been building hidden shipyards and weapons platforms in star systems that appeared empty. Entire sectors that the Council thought were uninhabited suddenly came alive with human activity. The galaxy's communication networks, trade routes, and transportation systems were all revealed to be dependent on human infrastructure. The galactic economy began to collapse as species realized that humans controlled more of their civilization than anyone had imagined. Supply lines that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly became unreliable. Space stations found their life support systems failing. Worlds discovered that their power grids were dependent on human-built components. Overlord Vexithara, his fleet decimated and his empire in chaos, made one final desperate decision. From his fortress world, he sent a message to all human forces. "If you do not withdraw immediately," he declared, "I will use planet-killer weapons against your civilian worlds. I have enough firepower to destroy every human colony in this sector." Fleet Admiral Park Seo-young's response came within minutes. She did not threaten or negotiate. She simply acted. Every Kethmaran military installation, shipyard, weapons factory, and fortress world was simultaneously destroyed by weapons that had been hidden throughout their territory for decades. The attacks were surgical and precise. Military targets were completely eliminated, but civilian areas were left untouched. The Kethmaran Empire's ability to wage war was erased in a single coordinated strike that lasted less than an hour. But the humans did not stop there. Captain Ju Minyuk specialized in psychological warfare against alien species. His teams began broadcasting recordings throughout Kethmaran space, recordings of their own survivors describing human capabilities. The effect was devastating. Kethmaran military units began surrendering without a fight. Some soldiers simply abandoned their posts and fled. Others refused to follow orders from commanders who had led them into a war against an enemy they could not comprehend. High General Nam Seongho's ground forces demonstrated that human warfare was not just about technology. When Kethmaran forces tried to use biological weapons against human civilians, the response was swift and terrible. Human soldiers moved through enemy positions with the efficiency that spoke of centuries of experience. They adapted to every new threat instantly. They showed no mercy to enemies who targeted civilians, but they carefully protected non-combatants. It was not conquest. It was the systematic dismantling of a military threat by a species that had forgotten nothing about how to wage war. As reports of human victories spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to make desperate calculations. Some alien races remembered ancient warnings and immediately surrendered, begging for mercy. Others, still believing they could resist, prepared for war. All of them were about to learn the same lesson that the Kethmarans had learned too late. When humans stop pretending to be peaceful, the galaxy discovers what they truly are. The war spread across the galaxy like fire. Within weeks, every major species had to choose a side. Some, remembering the ancient warnings, immediately contacted human forces and offered their surrender. Others, inspired by Kethmaran propaganda, or believing they could succeed where the Empire had failed, joined the fight against humanity. The Zelak Federation was one of the first to challenge human forces. They were a proud warrior culture with ships almost as powerful as the Kethmorans. Their leader, War Master Thulon, believed that humans had simply been lucky in their first battles. The Kethmorans were overconfident. He told his generals, "We will be smarter. We will use tactics they cannot predict." War Master Thulon was about to learn that human warfare was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Before Commander Yoon Nara's reconnaissance, ships had been watching Zelak forces for months. Her invisible vessels followed their fleets, recorded their communication patterns, and analyzed their battle tactics. When the Zelax finally attacked a human outpost, they found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their strategies better than they did. Human ships predicted every Zelak move before it happened. Weapons fire arrived at exactly the spots where Zelak vessels would be, not where they were. It was as if the humans could see the future, but that was not the strangest part. As the battle continued, the Zelaks noticed that their own weapons were becoming less effective while human weapons grew stronger. They did not know that engineer Lim Tae-hyun's adaptive technology was analyzing their equipment in real time and developing countermeasures. When the battle ended, the entire Zelak fleet had been disabled without losing a single human ship. War Master Thulon was captured alive and brought before Commander Yoon Nara. "How?" was all he could ask. "We had 150 years to study you," she replied. "Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic meeting taught us something new about how you think and fight. You never had a chance." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Brakari Consortium tried to use economic warfare against humanity, only to discover that their entire financial system was dependent on human-controlled networks. When they attempted to freeze human assets, they found that their own economy collapsed within hours. The Vorthon Collective attempted to use their superior numbers, fielding fleets of thousands of small, fast ships. They discovered that human vessels could coordinate their attacks with impossible precision, destroying entire swarms in minutes while barely taking damage themselves. Dr. Kang Woo-jin, now revealed as a human strategic mastermind, explained to the Galactic Council how extensive human preparations had been. "For 150 years, every piece of advice I gave you was designed to serve two purposes," he said during an emergency council session. "First, to prevent unnecessary conflicts and maintain peace. Second, to ensure that if war did come, humanity would have every possible advantage." He showed them star charts that revealed the true scope of human planning. Every trade route in the galaxy passes through at least one human-controlled system. Every major communication relay has human-built components. Every significant military base in Council space was designed with input from human consultants, who knew exactly how to defeat them. High Counselor Selnithos looked around the council chamber at the faces of beings who were beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. "You see now why the rule existed," he said. "Humans did not need to conquer the galaxy. They had already prepared to control it." Captain Ju Minhyuk's psychological warfare campaigns were proving to be as effective as any weapon. His teams had spent decades studying alien psychology, learning exactly what fears and motivations drove each species. For the proud Zelaks, he broadcast images of their disabled fleets and captured leaders. For the profit-minded Brakari, he showed them economic projections that proved resistance would bankrupt them. For the hive-minded Vorthons, he demonstrated how easily human technology could disrupt their collective consciousness. Each species received a message perfectly tailored to their deepest fears. Some began surrendering before human forces even reached their territory. High General Nam Seung-ho's ground forces faced their greatest test when the Morvac Empire began using biological weapons against human civilian populations. The Morvacs were a cruel species that believed fear was the greatest weapon. They were wrong. Human soldiers who had seemed gentle and civilized revealed a capacity for warfare that shocked even their allies. They moved through Morvac positions like a force of nature, adapting to every new threat with terrifying efficiency. But it was not just their skill that frightened the enemy. It was their absolute determination. When the Morvacs targeted human families, they had awakened something in humanity that their enemies could not comprehend. The humans did not just defeat Morvac forces, they systematically destroyed every biological weapon facility, every research lab and every military installation capable of producing such weapons. They did it with surgical precision, leaving civilian areas untouched. But the message was clear. Any species that targeted human non-combatants would face total military annihilation. Captain Lee Juan found himself commanding a battle group that included ships from a dozen different human colonies. He was amazed at how quickly the transformation had occurred. Farmers who had never held weapons were operating advanced military equipment with expert skill. Traders were coordinating complex fleet maneuvers. Scientists were developing new technologies in the middle of battles. How did we hide this from ourselves? He asked Dr. Park Minji as they watched their fleet engage another enemy force. "We did not hide it," she replied. "We simply called it something else. Every human learns basic combat skills in school. We called it physical education. Every human studies strategy and tactics. We called it game theory and business management. Every human knows how to work as part of a coordinated team. We called it cooperation and community building." She gestured at the tactical display, where human ships moved in perfect coordination. "We never stopped being what we were. We just found peaceful ways to practice the same skills. The galactic economy was in complete collapse. Species that had thought themselves economically independent discovered that humans controlled vital components of their infrastructure. Power grids failed, communication networks went dark, and transportation systems shut down. Some worlds tried to become completely self-sufficient, cutting all ties with human systems. They discovered that this was impossible. Human technology had become so integrated into galactic civilization that removing it was like trying to remove the foundation from a building. Overlord Vexathera, desperate and facing the complete destruction of his empire, made one final attempt to rally resistance against humanity. He sent messages to every remaining hostile force, trying to coordinate a massive alliance. "Together we can still defeat them," he broadcast. "They cannot fight the entire galaxy at once." Fleet Admiral Park, Sir Young intercepted his communications and sent a response that was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "Overlord Vexathara is correct that we cannot fight everyone at once," she said calmly. "Fortunately, we do not need to. We have already won." As if to prove her point, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human forces had simultaneously disabled the military capabilities of over 200 hostile worlds in a coordinated operation that had taken less than 6 hours. The remaining alien powers looked around and realized that they were surrounded. Human ships controlled every major hyperspace route. Human technology was integrated into every important system. Human intelligence networks had penetrated every government and military organization. The war was not over because humanity had not yet finished demonstrating their capabilities. But everyone understood that the outcome was no longer in question. High Counselor Zelnithos made one final attempt to broker peace before the remaining hostile forces made the same mistake as the Kethmorans. He sent a message to all surviving alien leaders. "Surrender now while humanity is still willing to show mercy. They have remembered what they are, but they have not yet forgotten who they chose to become. Do not give them a reason to stop caring about the difference." The war ended not with a great final battle, but with a simple announcement. President Li Jiwan, the leader of the Human Federation, appeared on every communication channel in the galaxy. She was a small woman with a gentle voice, but when she spoke, entire star systems listened. "To all species in the galaxy," she began, "the war is over. Those who surrender immediately will be treated with respect and fairness. Those who continue to fight will discover that our patience has limits." Within hours, the remaining hostile forces began surrendering. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they finally understood what they were fighting against. The Kethmoran Empire surrendered first. Overlord Vexthera himself appeared on galactic communications, his once proud voice broken and defeated. "The Kethmoran Empire formally surrenders to human forces," he said. We beg for mercy." One by one, every remaining hostile species followed. The proud Zalax, the cunning Brakari, the fierce Morvax, all of them laid down their weapons and asked for peace. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the new reality. But this time, President Li Jiwan did not sit in the small human section at the back of the chamber. She stood at the center and everyone else arranged themselves around her. "Members of the Council," she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "Humanity did not want this war. We spent 150 years trying to prevent it. But since you forced us to remember what we are, the galaxy must now accept what we have become." She gestured to a holographic display that showed human fleets positioned throughout the galaxy. "From this day forward, aggressive expansion and militaristic behavior will not be tolerated. All species may govern themselves as they choose, but attacks on peaceful worlds will be met with immediate and overwhelming response." High Counselor Zelnithos stood up slowly. "President Li Jiwan, what guarantees do we have that humanity will not abuse this power?" Li Jiwan looked at the ancient alien with something almost like sadness. The same guarantee you had before. Our choice to be better than we have to be. But now you know what happens if that choice is taken away from us. Admiral Choi Yeon-hee took command of establishing human peacekeeping fleets throughout the galaxy. These were not occupying forces, they were a reminder. Every species could see human ships patrolling their space, and every species understood what those ships represented. The human vessels did not interfere with local governments or trade. They simply made sure that no world would ever again experience what had happened to Kepler, 442b. The age of aggressive conquest was over, not because of treaties or agreements, but because everyone knew that humans would not allow it to continue. Dr. Hong Min-seok led the reconstruction efforts on worlds damaged by the conflict. His teams worked to rebuild destroyed cities and repair damaged infrastructure. But their real mission was more subtle. They made sure that no species would ever again develop the capability to threaten galactic peace on a large scale. It was not done through force or oppression. Instead, human technology was shared freely, but only the peaceful applications. Weapons research was quietly discouraged. Military buildups were met with offers of better alternatives. Species that might have become aggressive found themselves prospering through trade and cooperation instead. Overlord Vexithera was stripped of his title and power, but he was allowed to live. His former empire was transformed into a federation of peaceful worlds under human oversight. He spent his remaining years as a living reminder of what happened when someone broke the oldest rule in the galaxy. Ambassador Lim Sujung worked with alien governments to establish new trade relationships and cultural exchanges, but everyone understood that these were not negotiations between equals. Humanity was no longer the junior partner, asking for acceptance. They were the dominant power graciously, allowing others to participate in galactic civilization. The economic systems of the HFY galaxy were rebuilt around human infrastructure, but in a way that benefited everyone. Species that had once competed for resources now found themselves part of a cooperative network that ensured prosperity for all. War became not just dangerous but economically pointless. Captain Li Huan, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of his new flagship. The vessel was no longer disguised as a simple diplomatic ship. It was revealed as what it had always been, one of the most advanced warships ever built. Dr. Park Minji joined him at the observation deck. Below them, they could see a space station where human and alien children played together. The young ones laughed and shared games just as they had before the war. "Do you think we can ever go back to being what we pretended to be?" Park Minji asked. Li Huan watched the children for a long moment before answering. "We were never what we pretended to be, Minji. We were patient. We were careful. We were hopeful that we would never need to be anything else." He turned to look at her. "Now the galaxy knows the difference between choosing peace and being forced into submission. That knowledge will keep the peace better than any treaty." High Counselor Zelnithos lived long enough to see the new galactic order stabilize. In his final years, he often reflected on the irony of what had happened. The ancient warning had been meant to protect the galaxy from humanity's wrath, but by ignoring it, the other species had ensured that humanity would never again allow itself to be constrained by others' expectations. The rule had been simple: never provoke humans. It had existed for good reason, but like all important wisdom, it had been forgotten by those who had never experienced the consequences of ignoring it. Now it would never be forgotten again. Years passed. Decades passed. The galaxy prospered under human protection. New species were discovered and welcomed into the galactic community. Old enemies became allies. Trade flourished, cultures mixed, and peace reigned. But in schools across the galaxy, both human and alien children learned the most important lesson in galactic history. They learned about the Kethmaran Empire and what had happened when they chose aggression over cooperation. They learned about the price of breaking ancient wisdom. Most importantly, they learned the rule that would keep peace in the galaxy for generations to come. Never break the oldest rule in the galaxy. Never provoke humans, because when humans stop choosing to be peaceful, the galaxy discovers what they have always been capable of becoming. The children learned this lesson well. They played the same games, shared the same dreams, and built friendships across species boundaries. But they never forgot that some rules exist for very good reasons. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their eternal patrol. ensuring that no one would ever again make the mistake that had cost the galaxy so much to learn. The rule was simple. The consequences of breaking it were absolute. And everyone, human and alien alike, understood that some lessons are too important to ever be forgotten again.